some quartz.
Whoa.
And you that's everywhere, and it's the same.
There was a school campus I was on that had like boulder-sized pieces of that they used for landscaping.
The gold will come through veins in this quartz. So a lot of times when you find this quartz, you'll find gold veins or deposits. So, but that quartz is everywhere. And then, let's see here. So that's more.
That's cool.
Even though it's been weathered and it's actually looking more the same.
Oh yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
And this is, I don't know if you can probably see something that's got, so you can feel like, where's one that's real, kind of the same. You can see that, feel how heavy that one is, that's the quartz. And then you see if you can figure out what that is just by feel and weight.
It's definitely heavier.
And the look of it, I don't know what does it look like? If it was cleaned up a little bit, you might recognize it a little better.
Is it? It's not coal.
No, coal would be lighter.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That's iron.
Oh wow. Okay.
It's iron ore.
Whoa.
And you get some other kind of neat little colorations and calcium deposits. I don't know what kind that is because I'm not a geologist, but I play one on. But it's a lot of the rock over there. Mm-hmm. You'll get this it looks like calcified, like this white on the outside, and then in the middle it'll be this purplish. My other specimens show it better, but you get like this purplish coloring, just because it's different types of iron in it. So when it oxidizes, it kind of turns that color, depending on what's in it. But it's really pretty. You'll hit it in half, and it'll be purple in the middle.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So this is more of the quartz?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Quartz, and some of it might be calcite, but I think that's definitely a type of quartz. There's all kinds of different types of quartz. And like I said, I don't study it enough because people that get into rocks get way into rocks. Mm-hmm. And I have like a general interest, so I'm not very...
Josh is only enough into them to lick them, but not to be able to identify.
You can tell if something has salt in it.
Right.
If it's a salt-containing rock.
Also, it often looks different when it's wet.
Yeah.
So it helps with ID.
So like actually, you know what? I'm wrong. This is not quartz.
Is that salt?
This is quartz. Yeah. This is not even from Africa.
That's
Sorry.
from the mine.
This is from a salt mine in Kansas.
Oh, okay.
We got that on our way home. And it got mixed in with the rock
I was
collection.
like, wait a second. I was like, this isn't...
I was thinking about that. I was like, it's really clear.
So if you wanted to, you could taste this one, and it'll be super salty.
It's just like rock
just
salt.
like a little bit.
Wow, yeah. It is very salty.
It's concentrated salt. This is 800 feet. We went to a underground mine in Kansas. It's 800 feet underground.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's cool.
So that's halite, which is a type of salt. These are quartz. Sorry, I was lying to you right off the gate. Right out of the gate. That's more of a quartz.
Okay. Yeah.
You can see like this stuff. It has it looks individual. Like it has like this. It would actually break pretty easy.
It looks like it would break. Yeah.
It breaks pretty easy because it's all these little cubes, kind of the way it cleaves together. It's all these little individual ones, and the quartz actually.
This guy's more solid.
Yeah. Form. The matrices form longer edges, so they don't break as easy. Yeah, that looks way cleaner when you break it in half like that.
Good choice.
Anywho, so there's the rocks I did remember to bring.
Cool.
And like we said, the paintings here was by the artist.
This one is called the Zoe House. The Zoe is like the traditional medicine / shaman
/ witch doctor.
/
the Zoe.
The Zoe House.
Wow. So is this an actual, like, this picture is a real photo of the place?
It is. It's not a place that we've been to because this artist would do paintings of things from all over, like a couple of counties and places that he's visited.
As outsiders, we're not supposed to even know about the Zoe or who the Zoe is.
I have not been to this particular Zoe house, but I trust that it is a real place because all of his other paintings were.
Right.
Interesting thing about the Zoes is that throughout history, the person who did the metal works, or like the blacksmith.
Blacksmith, yes.
A lot of times the blacksmith in the communities would be the the Zoe, the medicine man.
Oh,
the,
really?
The witch doctor. Yeah.
Why?
And they
why
would
is
be
that?
the one to dress as the devil.
I don't know. I think because there's probably some folklore behind being able to forge metals, like the medicine, the magic, the alchemy of turning a rock into ore or ore into blades. Yeah. I think there's some significance there, so that's why they kind of look at it as a
and
what would you call it? Not traditional, but
and it's
magical person.
It's respected as something that takes expertise and wisdom. Like that's not something that just anyone could do. So that kind of naturally puts you in a position of power and respect.
Wow. You said the Zoe dresses like the devil. Is that what you said, or something like that? Ooh.
Country devil.
Yeah, the country devil. So for
it's not the devil like we think of the devil.
Ceremonies, etc. They call it the devil. Basically, they're dressed head to toe in like raffia skirt material. And then they will sometimes have a carved wooden mask. So they are the devil. Like technically, there's not a person in there, but in reality, it's typically the Zoe or who is doing that.
Gotcha. Let me see.
So it's when they say the country devil, they're not. It's not like what we think of as the devil in the West. It's not an evil incarnation or incarnation. It's like what you would our equivalent of like a spirit or someone that can be, what would you call it? It's not like a fairy or something like that. Some kind of magical creature that can bring harm or good.
Menacing spirit so much as like a mischievous spirit.
Right. A lot of times they're
however,
they're like a lot of times you'll see the country devils always messing around with playing with the kids.
Sure.
Yeah, or like dancing
drums, with the kids, and like putting at the same time though the children fear the devil, but they fear it at night, but during the day it's more common to see them kind of recreating with this representation.
So there are instances where it's harmless. Like our first year there, they were gearing up for an election, and so there were a lot of like political gatherings where they call it a rally, but like to support a candidate. Mm-hmm. And so often you would have the devil show up there and be dancing with the crowd and that kind of thing. And in that case, like the kids tease each other and they'll pretend to be scared, but it's not really a scary thing. Like it's not there to harm anyone. And then there are times when the devil and some of his minions who have drums will go around town from business to business and like they'll dance in front of the tea shop or whatever, and then the business owner is supposed to give them some money. That's kind of just a way for the Zoe to earn money, basically.
Okay.
But then there are other times when there's society business going on, like there's a men's society and a women's society that are their secret society that
it's like
used to be everyone was
cultural,
initiated into that traditional group. Mm-hmm. Now there are some people who are pushing away from it and choosing not to be involved. But each society, the men and the women, take turns. So it'll be the women's turn for a couple of years, and then when they're done with their rotation, it'll be the men's turn for a couple of years. Okay. And during that time, they recruit new members and put them through like training, where they'll go have a camp in the woods for a certain period of time and teach them traditional things. And then you become an initiated member of the society. So during those times, when they're doing the recruitment and initiation, there will be times when the devil comes through town and anyone who is not initiated is not supposed to see them or they get abducted. So during those times, there will be like a town crier who comes ahead of the devil and warns everyone the devil is coming. And then it's expected that if if it's the men's society devil and you're not male or adult or initiated, you go inside and you don't come out until they tell you that it's okay to come out again. And if you do stay out and they see you, then they grab you and take you to the camp in the woods.
And they do look, you get different costumes, different representations, but for this one is more of that's the raffia, all the on the kind of grass skirts. Like a lot of times I've seen them where it'll be from head to toe, all that raffia. So it looks like Cousin It from the Addams Family kind of thing. Right. But a lot of times they'll also wear their tribal masks, where each tribe has different masks that represent their tribe. And a lot of times you'll see that mask on, like they'll wear the mask with different head dressing and with the raffia.
Okay.
So that lets
There's
you
also-
know who it is. Like there was one time I was hanging out in Monrovia or somewhere, like a bigger place, where there would be people from different tribes. And there was a devil dancing outside. I was sitting at the tea shop or soup shop or whatever, and they were like, "Oh, the mono devil here again."
Kind of like things like that.
So they can tell which tribe it's from based on
Also,
those small.
a lot of times
differences
these are
in
for
mask.
these representations are more the celebrations, and then the country devil or the Zoe typically is the person who does these celebrations. But when the Zoe is in, like when they're doing their initiations or their society activities at night, doing their secret rituals, a lot of times we have never seen them, but what's been described to us is they dress their body in all white paint.
Okay.
Or different decorative white paint, and that's that representation of the spirit coming to visit those communities. I've talked to community members a lot of times that incarnation turns into because they do their older beliefs are centered around animals. Like they believe in what's the name for that? Like when you die, you become a certain animal. Animorph? No.
Reincarnation.
No, it's not reincarnation. There's a certain word for that belief structure of when you die, you become an animal. So like there's certain animals. Each tribe has different animals that you're not allowed to eat. It's their taboo because it's believed that when you die, you become that animal. Like a lot of times crocodiles, snakes, even dogs. Certain animals that most people probably wouldn't even eat anyways, but there is a cultural taboo around eating that animal for certain tribes because it's believed like if you live around the rivers, these crocodiles are the spirits of your ancestors. Right. And that's where they live. They live in the river. So you don't go into the river, into their world, or they'll take you down with it. When a crocodile takes you in, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And there's also I saw a picture. A lot of times the celebrations, they'll have individuals on these stilts, and they'll be way up in the air, and very kind of. Those country devils, the celebrations definitely look more like what you'd see in like Mardi Gras or like in the. It's interesting seeing how that culture has come over, and I think it's at this point it's kind of a back and forth.
Sure.
Feeding off each other.
Right.
But
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways. Zoe House.
Zoe House.
Gotcha. It's the rabbit hole of just one painting.
So, and you said that if you're not initiated or if you're not male, and there was one other kind of requisite, I guess.
If you're younger, so you haven't been initiated yet because you're a small child. So.
Okay. Then you could be abducted? Is that what?
Yeah, so like they take you into the camp. And if you,
a lot of times it's a ransom.
So if you're a man and you're not initiated and it's the men's society, they might forcefully initiate you. They're not supposed to do that anymore, but that used to happen a lot, and it still happens.
It's still. You're not
legally they're not allowed to do that.
The government is
The
supposed
law
to.
is,
It's like a wink, wink, nod,
However,
nod, but we know it still goes on.
If I'm a woman and it's the men's society, they can't forcefully initiate me.
Okay.
So they might just hold me for ransom, and my family has to give them money for me to come back to town.
And everyone knows where the camp is, or what's the
You're
camp?
not supposed to.
Okay.
It's
I mean,
it's where
they probably do because half of the town is involved in it.
Right.
It's where.
But you're not supposed to.
Okay.
The camps are where they take you. Typically, it's like when you are ready to become a man. If it's the men's society, if you're ready to become a man, this is where they take you to learn all the ancient ways that's been passed on. How to.
Wow.
Sometimes if you're good with plants, like you'll be on track to become a medicine man because you learn how to use certain plants for different kinds of medicine.
Okay.
For different sicknesses.
Right.
So that you're learning that kind of ancient knowledge, which is really interesting because we had some fellow volunteers that are interested in like biochemistry, like pharmaceutical applications for like plants, kind of what we've seen out of South America is more well known. Right. But being able to go into these areas and like, okay, this plant acts as an anticoagulant or
fever
reducer, because
diuretic.
Pharmaceutical companies are constantly looking for new chemical compounds that they can derive from these plants. So there's a whole industry around
And it's
going to these places and learning these ancient knowledges before and the sad thing is that's the real kind of crappy thing. A lot of these places, because in order to advance as a culture and a society, they have to adapt different agricultural practices. That means clear cutting or reducing their land, and so they're actually losing a lot of these plants that we didn't even know Western society may even know existed.
Right.
And they're just going to be lost to oblivion because that knowledge hasn't been transferred out of those communities, because there's, if you don't know what's there, why would you go looking for it? And so it's kind of a...
So did you guys encounter this type of, or were you introduced to, if you're not feeling well, try this? Did you encounter that?
They know that white people aren't typically going to use traditionalist methods. So they know that we're going to go to the pharmacy and get Western pharmaceuticals, or we have a Peace Corp doctor who's going to give us something.
Let me put a caveat. When they say white people, that's another word for the West.
The West, okay.
We had
even if I was there.
We had full on...
They would call you
African American, very dark skinned fellow volunteers, and because of the way they talked and the way they acted, you're a white man.
Wow.
And the white man just kind of encompasses this idea of the West.
Yeah. Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Which didn't make a lot of our volunteers happy to be called white man.
I'm sure, but I totally get the mindset.
But after a while you realize what's going on.
Oh yeah.
And it's culture thing, which kind of, I don't know, that's more interesting to me, because they're looking past something like skin color, and they're actually looking at culture. That's how they see your behavior and how you talk and act more than...
Although they then make generalizations as a result of it, which are incredibly frustrating.
Right. So there's
it's still a form of,
and it's a double-edged sword. Yeah. So there's a lot of negative association with being dark-skinned from America.
Sure.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So, anywho, so the medicine. I'm sorry, I just wanted to...
Yeah, so there were times when
white people,
a
lot of times, a lot of people aren't going to understand, when you say white... In America, when you say white people, that's a whole different...
Exactly.
I just had that said to me so much that I forget.
Yeah, you definitely learn to let a lot of our baggage go when it comes to being triggered by things over there.
Sure.
And that was one of them.
Context is totally different, yeah.
So I would start calling them white. I'd call them white man, and or black man, and they're like white man, and they're black man. It's like, oh, see, we can both do it. Yeah. They're very.
Some of them found that funny.
It's direct.
Some of them didn't know what to do with it.
Some of them.
And that was my point. I'm just gonna what this crazy white man doing?
What is he doing? Yeah. Interesting.
So there would be times that I'd be walking down the road with a friend, and they'd be like, "You see that plant there? If you getting malaria or you get fresh cold coming on, you take it and you beat it in the mortar, and then you mix it with hot water, you drink it as tea, and then it will flush out your whole system." Okay. So basically hey, that one's a diuretic.
Okay, yeah.
They weren't saying you should take this. They were just sharing information with me. So I never had something that I was offered necessarily at a time when I was sick.
Right.
But they were very open about, we know that this one is used for this.
Right.
So.
Were you guys encouraged not to?
By our Peace Corp?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
Peace Corp said, do not touch bush
medicine. Yeah, because you have no idea first off, how your body will react to it.
And it's a big liability for them, because if you come to them and say, I had this problem and then I took this, they have no way of knowing what was in that thing that you took, right? You may have been told it was one thing, but they have no way of verifying what you put in your system. You don't know,
basically you're poisoning yourself, and you don't know if it's a good poison or a bad poison, right? Because different chemicals react differently, especially if you combine them with other things. So you have something in your body, and they don't know what it is, and they take a pharmaceutical from the a regular medicine that we would take here, because our doctors are Western doctors, and if they give us something, it may react, and it could kill you.
One problem on top of another.
Especially if you're talking about pills that are blood thinners, or like I said, the anticoagulants or the diuretics. It could have all kinds of crazy side effects. So that being said, there's absolutely volunteers that get way deep into. In fact, we just recently learned that there's members after we left that actually
are joining society.
They actually join the societies,
which is a huge no-no.
Right, and it's frustrating because if you want to go back and do that on your own time, I guess, but. Peace Corp.
We benefit from Peace Corp being well known, and there being certain boundaries that were set up that are just generally known. That like if you're Peace Corps, they know that you won't be involved in this thing, and so they just don't bother you about it.
Right. So what it does
And
is it creates more problems down the road for other volunteers.
You set precedent.
Right. It's like, oh, the volunteer, 10 years ago did this, and this, and then you set that expectation up.
Yeah.
And then you make life more difficult for other volunteers coming in down the line. Yeah.
You have enough of that as is. Like the previous volunteer in our first community where I was teaching had gone to mass with them for Ramadan and like was very involved in some things that I didn't personally want to participate in. And so there's always this like, oh, the last volunteer did this. There's tons of that.
Well, and I feel like what happens is...
And you deal with it already. So like, don't make it about the things that are really a big thing. Like, don't set that precedent. I'm already going to have to deal with you learning the language better than me and getting to hear that all the time or whatever. That's fine. That's part of service. But I shouldn't get pressured to join a society because you made that choice and you weren't supposed to.
Yeah. Well, a lot of time there's pressure. So Peace Corps is a cultural exchange. Well, the majority of your experience or of your service is that cultural exchange. Your primary objective is to whether you're a nurse, a doctor, if you're working in a clinic, or if you're working in we were doing education. That's our primary goal, is to be teachers. But you quickly learn that cultural exchange, like learning about your culture, you're learning about my culture. That becomes the primary, for a lot of people, becomes the primary objectives, is like that cultural exchange, like learning about each other. And I think what's happening is a lot of people are just going way too, it's not a balanced back and forth. Like I'm just going to full on deep dive into someone else's culture and just fully immerse yourself in that culture. And not necessarily, it doesn't become a back and forth like it was intended to be.
Yeah,
and like I said, there are some benefits. So like if you want to fully immerse yourself and go fully into a different culture, that's fine. But that's not, like I said, you are outside the operative bounds of what Peace Corps wants you to be doing.
Right. And kind of what the overall purpose is.
Right, because...
that exchange, like you're talking about,
right,
is very important.
It becomes like, it's real popular. I don't know if maybe you've heard of it, but the voluntourism.
Okay, yeah.
People go to these remote areas for 2 weeks, and maybe they'll go build a school, or which, in theory sounds great, but there's a lot of side effects of those short-term projects that you don't have the impact that you're going to have. And so a lot of people go over there, they want to like fully jump into this culture, even if it's for 2 weeks, and then like try to take as much, even though you're not going to learn anything in 2 weeks, in my opinion. You might get some mental snapshots of what it's like to live in those places. Right. But I feel like a lot of people take that when they have that in the back of their mind, like they want that experience. They want that alternative way of living and looking at the world. And it's kind of almost becomes a selfish endeavor to like jump in, because then you're not thinking about the overall objective of Peace Corps and the people that are going to be coming behind you that are going to serve in that location. Right. And it's honestly, it's very dangerous to do that. And in my opinion, like you make choices over there, that everyday choices, that increase or decrease your risk of injury, whether it's from traveling, different ways of traveling, motorcycle, these tuk-tuks, KKs, these little three-wheeled bikes, cars. Right. You get in the wrong car, or you're riding in the back, or a culture, like how you act around certain people, like you set certain expectations. Maybe you give some money to someone, then someone else realizes, oh, this guy's got money. Like there's all these different things that you got. The risk mitigation, that's how you keep yourself alive. That's how you learn to live in these countries, that you're not from. And when you go and do that, like you're adding such a huge risk to yourself and then to others who are around you, that it's kind of a selfish endeavor, in my opinion.
Absolutely selfish. I can kind of see that. Were there any situations that you guys were in where you felt like you were in danger? Like more than we've told, more than we've cared to tell. How about that?
There was a Facebook group called Jaded Corps,
which I think may have gotten shut down.
It did get shut down. But it was volunteers
venting on Facebook,
sharing memes about our experiences of service.
Okay.
And there was one that I always go to when I think of danger, that was Ralph from The Simpsons sitting in the back of a bus. And the caption on top says, "Me anytime I use public transport," which is the only way to get around when you're a volunteer because you can't have your own personal vehicle, right? So me anytime I use public transport, and at the bottom it's him going, "I'm in danger."
Oh my. Yeah.
Which is absolutely true. Anytime you get in a vehicle there, anytime you get on a bike, like they have horrible accidents all the time. Terrible things happen.
Well, and that's like just the everyday, like, getting
that's
around.
just
Big
like
deal. Yeah.
literally to get anywhere, I have to put myself in some amount of danger. Similar to here, like anytime I get in a vehicle, I'm in some danger. So yes, there's absolutely, but there are also other more unique things to that environment, like a time when you end up in a crowd that you shouldn't have been in. I had one of those moments.
Mob justice is extremely common there. So, like, let's say you're in a crowded market and someone steals something and, thief, and it doesn't matter. Sometimes they don't get the right person, but whoever gets pointed out, it's just people just swarm the guy, and you typically beat him to death.
Wow.
It happens a lot. In fact, it's not funny, but I find it funny. There's a picture. There's a picture of this guy on top of about a 50-foot light pole, and you seen this guy on the light pole. The crowd all below, and you're like, what is going on? And then like in the caption below, like the thief. The man is a thief, and he scaled that light pole to save his life.
Right.
Or there's an instance where a driver. Because there is limited asphalt roads. Okay. Where the more developed parts of the country are, where outsiders have come in with, like, whether it's gold mines. There's a rubber plantation in Liberia that's Firestone, the American company from Ohio. Firestone has a rubber plantation there. So there's these outside influences that have kind of determined where these roads have been built and maintained and paved. So they're relatively good compared to most of the, probably 95% of the country's roads. And so people, of course, drive exceedingly fast, and these roads go through a lot of villages. So you can imagine in these villages, you have children everywhere, and they're not necessarily fully aware of the road, and a child was struck and killed by a driver going too fast. And instead of the guy stopping and like trying to help and everything, he immediately fled to the nearest police station, because if he got out of that car, they would have killed him. Right. And so that stuff like that's extremely common with mob violence. So we as volunteers, you have to be aware of your surroundings all the time. That's like the number one rule of they call it using your radar. So being aware, being ready and being aware of your surroundings is the most important part. Like, what's going on around you? Is there somebody fighting over here? Is it going to turn into a riot? Those kind of things happen. Us personally, I started telling you a story yesterday about the rubber band arm guy and the knife. You can tell today. You can tell the story.
Funny. That was so funny.
It's funny, but it wasn't funny. That's the thing. Like, it's like this should scare the shit out of me. But are you just kind of like, is this for real? Yeah. This is really happening. Tuck his arm. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Tell the story.
So we were together on our way back to our site from shopping in the city, and we were running late. We had gotten stuck in town for longer than we wanted. So the last vehicle available of the day was a pickup truck, and they pretty much with a pickup truck just pack lots of people into the bed, but we're not allowed to do that as volunteers. So we told them, I beg you, we're not allowed. We're Peace Corp. Please let us ride in the front. So they let us ride in the front, and there's like 20 people in the back, and we get going. And we are maybe 20 minutes out of town, but that's very much out on the dirt road away from the city.
20 minutes in a vehicle it's kind of like Alaska. You go half an hour off any road and you're in the bush, and it's very much like that in Liberia. So we're still a ways from home, but also a ways from the city, and kind of in that area where it's not the middle of nowhere, but it's like a town every so often, you know. And we start hearing a woman, one of the old mas in the back, shouting, "Just stop, just stop." And finally the driver stops, and we happen to be next to a few houses, like we've just come into the next town. And we see this guy
come running around the front of the vehicle, and then another one coming the other way, and one is swinging a cutlass, a machete, and the other has a big stick that he's swinging.
It was a steel pipe.
Oh, I thought it was a big stick. Okay.
No, it was not. It was a steel
A
pipe.
metal pipe. Anyway, they each have something they're swinging around at each other. And of course, screaming obscenities and all kinds of stuff. And one of them has an arm that obviously has some kind of disability that he's not able to control.
Fairly common over there. I don't know what it is, but no motor control. It's just like rubber band arm.
So he's got his weapon in the other arm, and he keeps like trying to tuck the bum arm behind him into his waist belt or something to keep it out of the way. And they're swinging weapons at each other. We finally figure out that what happened was the other one had made a comment about the one with the bad arm's sister, and that he wanted her. And so the one with the bad arm had said basically, hey, that's my sister, back off. And the other guy was like, you in what arm? So they had then gone at it. So basically, we're sitting in the cab of this truck just watching this very physical altercation with weapons happen, and reflecting on the fact that like
we should be more
6
scared
months
than we were.
earlier, this might have concerned us. But right now, there's no aggression being targeted towards us. Right. So we don't actually feel like we're in danger. We're just really tired and ready to go home. And can we please like wrap this up so we can get going again? So
that's literally what they like.
That is
the whole crowd convinced the Rubberband Man and his sister to get out of the
Rubberband Man
to get out of his getting to like they say put me down or get down. And drive. So we drove off, but
So basically, they just mediated and said, "You're not getting back in the truck," and then everyone else got back in the truck, and we finally
including
got to
the
go.
guy that started the whole thing,
right?
And it made it worse because he was like kind of laughing the whole time too, because this guy's trying to probably would kill him if he let him, but he's got a lead pipe or a metal pipe, and he's like kind of laughing. He's like, "My man, calm down, come down." He's like telling him, calm down, come down. He's like, "Are you serious?" No, he was just. So silly, man. So silly. God, what other? I had that the thing about Liberia is like, some of these scary things happen, but it's not very often aimed at outsiders. Like a lot of times, Liberia is a very friendly country towards strangers. They say, strangers
we
are
love
welcome
strangers.
Here. They always want very friendly people when it comes to outsiders. So especially having our skin color over there, like you might be targeted for like a pickpocket or someone trying to hustle you or robbery. We did have a lot of a few armed robberies, a few like snatches, that kind of stuff, but no like targeted violence necessarily at you. It can happen, especially like you get into communities where you're there for 2 years and you build these personal relationships. There have been instances of like, some type of relationship issue leads to a targeted attack. Whether, if you got, some volunteers do get girlfriends and boyfriends. And when you start getting into that kind of stuff, like that's a different dynamic. Yeah. And so it's more of like it's not because you're an outsider. It's because you've done something deliberate to insert yourself into a family or that kind of stuff.
But the majority of the time, like that situation with the fight,
you said violence is around you, but not at you.
Yeah, you are a spectator, so you see things happening around you, but you personally are not in danger unless you were to insert yourself into it.
Right. I did have one. And once again, it wasn't even targeted me. It was actually pretty. Once again, it's funny, but it shouldn't be funny. We were at a workshop, and we have these kind of more regional kind of hub cities that are designed for trainings. And actually, it's kind of interesting. The training center for Peace Corp is actually the first president that was Liberia was a I don't know what you would call it, kind of oligarchy type.
Yes.
They did have elections, but they're very corrupt, and most of the people outside of the city didn't actually vote, like a lot of the people in the villages.
And it was a single party system.
System, and so very. We can get into the history later, but anyway, so the first man that led the coup in '79 was Samuel Doe, and so he killed the sitting president and took over the country, military coup, and so that there was 10 years of relative peace, and then a civil war broke out in '89. So Samuel Doe. So the reason I bring up Samuel Doe is the training center that the Liberia gave the American government for Peace Corp training is the former compound of Samuel Doe.
Still called Doe Palace.
And it's called Doe Palace. Or Doe
Okay.
Palace. Doe Palace.
Doe Palace.
Yeah,
Okay.
the way, they don't enunciate the same way we do. But yeah, Doe Palace. So it's kind of interesting. Anyway, so we're at Doe Palace, and the taxi unions are going on strike because the cops keep shaking down the taxis for money. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, but Liberia, the 2 years we were there, was the poorest country in the world.
Okay.
So things are tough there, and and then the cops keep, because the cops are government employees, and they're not getting paid by the government. So what do? They shake down people on the street, and they have all these checkpoints that they use to, drugs, criminals, whatever, and typically are very corrupt places. All these government checkpoints run by immigration and local or the National Police Service. Anyways, but so the transportation union was striking all over Liberia because of all these shakedowns. Mm-hmm. And so we were told, no one's able to leave right now because they're trying to figure out how to get people out back to their communities without using the taxis, because that's how we get around to these beat up cars that are God knows how many times put back together. Anyways, so we finally get told we can leave, and we find someone who's willing to take us. Mm-hmm. And so we're on our way. It's me and two other volunteers, and we're on our way. We had to pay extra money because no one else wanted to get in the taxi that day. And we were told
shocking.
And we were told the strikes were over. So that, because our bosses are Liberian, they're in communication with the national police people and the immigration people, and everyone's saying the strikes are over. They're talking to the taxi union. Strike is over. It's free to travel, or safe to travel. Mm-hmm. And we get in this car, and we're good for about an hour. And we pick up someone walking alongside the road with a battery. I should have put two and two together at first to figure out what the deal was. And we come up to the hill above the city, and the man with the battery's like, "Put me down. Like I'll get out here." And okay, puts him down, and the driver keeps going. And he goes into this crowd to let off another guy. Or there's a crowd alongside the road where all the taxis are, and he goes to put this car down. All of a sudden, all these people just swarm the car, start hitting the guy through my. I'm sitting behind the driver in the back seat. Start hitting the guy through my window, and arms punching through, just going after this driver, and pull him out of the car, pull the keys out. They didn't beat him right there, but they're just slapping him upside the head because they're very physical like that. Physically aggressive. So slapping him and, you stupid and all this. So the strike apparently wasn't over in that particular town.
Right.
And this taxi guy is basically, driving when he's not supposed to be driving. We're supposed to be shut down. And so we end up being detained there for an hour while they try to figure this whole thing out.
Wow.
But the funny thing was when they pulled him out of the car, me and the other two volunteers were asking him, what's the problem? What's going on? Mm-hmm. And they look at me because in that culture, if you're a male and you're big male, you're the boss man, and they said, "Boss man, this man not to be driving today. We got no problem with you or your people, but this man, he will not travel." Okay. And so, but we're at the same time, we're in the middle of nowhere, not nowhere, but we're in the middle of our journey. Yeah. And we still have 4 more hours of traveling to get back to our home. Oh my gosh. And we're sitting here trying to negotiate. Letting this guy. Yeah. We paid this man to take us to this particular town. Please let us go. Mm-hmm. So that was a little unnerving. And then when we got to the next town, it turns out that when they said the strike was over, what they actually meant was the national police went in and just beat anyone who was, because they were blocking the roads. Mm-hmm. They were blockading the roads, and they went into this one particular town that we had to get to then go up country to. So we have this one town that's on the coal tar or on the asphalt, and then you get a bush taxi, the more beat up car to take you, on the bad roads up wherever you're going. Right. And when we got there, I think there's something 100 people that had been arrested, and they were all at the police station. When they said the union where the strike was over, that means that they physically broke the strike and had arrested all these taxi drivers that normally would be taking us. So. Just have these uncomfortable situations, and it definitely was a little unnerving being there, but no one, there was a couple drunks that obviously were part of the ruckus that had been beat up, and they were making comments about, us trying to travel and all this. And
right.
But it wasn't never like direct. It was just, it's just intense. It's an intense thing, but not necessarily directed at you.
Right. Yeah, I can only imagine the amount of stress involved with with being in the situation.
Well, and you just get to the point where like, well, I might, sometimes you feel like that. I was like, well, if I die today, I die today. Like sometimes you just kind of like, especially in those cars, like,
yeah,
you have no idea, Jesus take the wheel as they.
Yeah.
Either I make it or I don't. And
I relinquish all, like, I can't control this anymore. So that was the one thing that you learn a lot, which kind of helps you coming back here, is you learn to let go of the things that you can't control.
Right.
And so it makes you kind of a more patient person. It makes you more, less anxious about things. Mm-hmm. Because you've spent 2 years with that, like literally letting go of the fact that you may not, because, it's not like, it's not like serving in combat or military, but, it's like, it's still very high stress, dangerous situation that you're, compared to like over here, unless you're law enforcement over here.
Right.
But you still like get this kind of like chronic stress on yourself that you have to learn to deal with. And one of those chronic stresses is like learning to accept the fact that when you're traveling, because the roads are bad, the transportation vehicles are bad, drivers are drunk, other drivers are drunk, like, stuff happens,
So do you feel like the core volunteers are all experiencing that same amount of stress? And is it unique to you guys, or is it in the culture at large? This kind of like, I don't know what's going to happen today.
You mean like, within Liberia?
It's absolutely the culture at large. When you travel in a vehicle there, they will almost always pray before you go.
Yeah, that's right.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And in fact, I felt like that started happening more in our second year. Like, I don't remember that happening consistently my first year of service, but my second year, the car would not move until we had done that.
Wow.
And there is very much a religious culture around that as well, that when you say goodbye to someone and you say tomorrow, like, I'll see you tomorrow, and they will always say God willing or by his grace, because to them, they don't have control over that. And when I first arrived, that felt like a cop-out, because you frequently have people who don't show up to school for the day because, something happened, and it just, I can't get there.
Right.
And I'm often like, you can will yourself to come, right? Like, you can overcome small obstacles. But to a culture that has survived a civil conflict where you never knew from day to day whether you and your family and friends were going to be safe or not. You never knew when the next militia was going to come through and completely disrupt your lives. And then started recovering from that and got hit by Ebola, which they also felt like they have no control over who's going to get sick and who you're going to lose and whatever. And so there's very much this feeling that with that randomness of awful things happening to people
for no reason,
how else would I be here if not that God meant me to be? And so they have this very strong feeling that I only am able to do the things that I do and be in any place that I'm able to be because God is allowing me to be. And so it is by his grace, it is because God is willing. And if he doesn't mean for me to be there, perhaps I will drop dead tomorrow or I will fall sick tomorrow. And that's just how things go.
There's definitely, and it's not just anecdotal, like there's been some studies done that, 80% or more of the country has PTSD.
Okay.
And not mild, but like
chronic, because
people debilitating.
Yeah, and living in an impoverished place is traumatic to begin with, not to mention additional things like conflict or illness. So, yeah.
How would you explain living in the impoverished place? Like, go a little deeper into that.
So, just nothing comes easy. From day to day, you don't know whether you're going to be able to make enough money to feed the family. You don't know when someone is going to fall sick because of hygienic conditions. Everyone is sick all the time. Like, there's just constant illness happening.
It's extremely common for people to go 2 or 3 days without food.
Okay.
And it is
And
extremely
sadly-
common to have family members die because
Malnutrition related disease.
Yeah, and-
Child mortality under 5 is what? I can't remember the number.
it's like 30% or higher.
I mean, ranking in the world though, it's fairly I can't remember the ranking off the top of my head, but it's fairly high.
Yeah.
For child mortality under 5 is one of the highest places in the world. Because not only do you have the malnutrition stuff, but it's also culturally not practical practice, but it's culturally common, I guess, that when it comes to like eating, the man or the head of household always eats first and eats their fill, and the last people to eat are always the small children, and that's kind of in the culture.
And that means that the protein gets eaten first before you get to the small
And the
children. So
children-
they are getting the minimal like rice with a little bit of flavor on it.
And like I'm sure you're aware, like for children, like protein is one of the most important parts of their diet that you can feed a child for growth.
Growth, yeah.
And a lot of times it's the reverse. Like it should be the adult that can
Right.
survive on just brothy
rice
water
or
and some
okay.
rice.
Right.
So
a lot of the-
because children don't have good nutritional intake, then their immune system, small children have a weaker immune system to begin with because they haven't been exposed to things and become immune to them like adults have. But then on top of that, we add on the malnutrition, so
Right.
then they're even weaker. So that small illnesses that a child here with good nutrition would be able to fight off is not able to. And so that increases the mortality rate further.
Okay.
And that
makes
goes for
sense.
adults as well, that because they are not healthy,
Chronically malnourished, your body's susceptible. So.
right, they're very susceptible to illnesses. And there isn't treatment available necessarily. And so then you have something that may be treatable and you succumb to it, etc.
And then how does sanitation play a role in all of that?
Oh, there's not a whole. Well, it changed a lot after Ebola because
Yes.
it really has become culture. It wasn't culturally practiced to wash your hands for any reason after using the bathroom or after you shake hands. But when Ebola hit, it really drove home, and they really spent a lot of time. You can still see all the billboards are still up about every time wash your hands every time before you eat, after you shake hands. If you go to the bathroom, like they really try to institute that idea of hygiene, self-hygiene, because that component alone within Ebola led to a lot of deaths, as well as it's a common cultural practice to wash the bodies in the Muslim community, as well as in a lot of traditional communities to wash the bodies. And in some communities, they actually drink that water from the body. After the body's been washed, they drink the washed water. So like the water that comes off the body itself, they'll drink that water. And so it's
So
a real quick way to spread disease.
Right.
Because a lot of times, if that person died from Ebola, all those people are going to be exposed.
There was a village that we were told about in our county at our second site the communities tend to somewhat naturally isolate. So there was a dominantly Muslim community, and someone fell ill with Ebola, and the imam in the community went and did the death rites for that person when they died, and then became sick with Ebola themselves. And when the imam then succumbed to it, they did the traditional bathing, and it is considered when you have an imam who passes away, that water is what's the right word? Like very powerful, basically.
Is it sanctified or I can't remember. Sacred.
Yeah, it's sacred. And so everyone wants to get some of that water because then that's religiously beneficial for you.
And the
so
imam, is that what you're saying?
yeah.
And that's
It's like
their priest.
It's
their
the Muslim priest.
The Muslim, yeah.
It's like the leader in that the local community will have an imam at that mosque.
Right. Okay. So then literally everyone in town drank some of the water that Ebola patient had been bathed in, and almost the entire town died. Like there were very few survivors because everyone took in the virus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that Ebola, when the epicenter of the outbreak was actually a kind of tri-state area between Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. So it was a tribal area that where it first took off because it was because people came from because it's regional hubs aren't the state or the national boundaries don't really have a lot to do with the tribal boundaries. I mean, they kind of do, but tribes especially when you get to the interior, they all blend across. So that this particular tribe was tribal, right? It was like a big chief that died, a big boss man within this certain tribe. So you had people come from 3 different countries to his death. And then when they left, like everyone kind of had some people took that sickness back to each country.
Wow.
And you have a lot of families who are spread across those borders, and the border doesn't really matter when you have family on the other side, and so they come and go and visit each other regularly, and that's what
border
added to the spread.
Got it.
So it was really sad because people literally couldn't, when people are dying, it's very common to touch your loved ones as they're dying or lying there dying or after they've died, and so. It was another trauma. These people weren't even allowed to say goodbye to their family. And then some of the crazier stuff when the U.S. government got involved in because our military had a huge operation over there to build these quarantine centers to contain the outbreak. And so on top of so you have this in their world this crazy illness that's just pulling people out of nowhere, and then you have got people in hazmat suits showing up to these remote villages. So I showed you what the country devil kind of looked like, right? Mm-hmm. Now imagine large groups of people dressed in hazmat suits showing up to these villages. Right. You would think the end of times were coming, like the devil incarnate is coming. These evil demons are coming to take our loved ones.
Right.
And so there were actual instances before they changed the policy. There were instances of whole hazmat teams being killed when they come to a village because instead of being there to help protect people, they're interpreting it as they're coming to take people, take them away to die.
Sure.
And so it's kind of something I've always been really proud of is like the people that work with Peace Corp, the Liberians that are there. When the outbreak happened, they had the option of just staying home and not being involved. And a lot of our Liberian Peace Corps workers actually went out because Peace Corps is interesting because we bring together people from all the tribes in the country. So we have people that speak every dialect. Somebody speaks the dialect in the office. And so working with the State Department, the U.S. government, our Peace Corps employees, the Liberians went out with these hazmat teams and would speak on behalf to try to explain to the people in their own dialect, like what's happening, why they're here, what they're doing. They're not here to hurt you. And was very instrumental in like helping contain the outbreak. And it's a really awesome story that tells you the quality of human beings that we were working with over there.
Yeah. That's awesome.
If you think about the fact that everyone else they were going out with was in a hazmat suit.
And that was the thing. They would
just walk exposed. Up in plain clothes and talk to these people to help broach that divide. And imagine
that was the thing.
Imagine the risk that they were taking. And
we did lose one. Right? We had one employee, Peace Corps employee, die. I'm pretty sure from that office from Ebola.
But they told us the story about one of them would go home every night, and his family would be so happy to see him, but he would not allow them to greet him or touch him until he had gone outside, taken off all of his clothes, and fully bathed and left anything that could be contaminated outside. And then once he came into the house clean, he could greet his family.
Wow.
So just understanding that you're taking that risk and doing everything possible to not pass it along to your loved ones, but being willing to put yourself out there to help your country. And they were absolutely instrumental in broaching that divide and helping there to be some progress.
So, that's amazing. That's cool. Yeah. How do you guys think the West is affecting Liberia? I know that's a large question.
I'll just say this. Sorry, I'll just say this. Like, the world watches what we do. They know more about what's going on than probably a lot of Americans know. As far as watching our politics, things that are going on in the U.S. The outside world is all watching our internal stuff. It's amazing how much, and especially because social media is common there now. Like we talked about, there's barely electricity, there's no running water, sanitation, but there's cell towers everywhere being put up. So everyone has the internet, which is still bizarre to me, but they have the ability to observe us. And so just from that aspect alone, everything we do is being watched, and how we behave as people towards each other is being observed from all over the world. So I think it's important for people to know that we and it's not only that we're being observed; it's that they look to us as as an example, right? Like America's doing this, so maybe we should do this, or we are leaders in the world, whether or not we want to be leaders in the world,
Right.
not just economically, but socially and culturally.
Yeah. You will frequently hear people say, well, in America, you wouldn't see this happening. And they'll give some anecdotal example of how they think it works over here.
Okay.
Because they feel they should be more like us.
Yeah. As far as like direct impacts, I mean, I'll tell my when I was sitting with a group of men when Trump was caught on the hot mic talking during his, not even hot mic, during his cabinet meeting, wasn't it? When he made the shithole country comment. Do you remember that?
Yep,
a couple years ago?
Yep. Not a great moment.
No, but I'll tell you what, part of it is interesting to me because I mean, obviously it's pretty obvious, like that's a really detrimental thing to say, and that's obvious, but it's how it was perceived, and the discussion it caused over there was the interesting part to me. Because first off, because I am, I have lighter skin, they don't necessarily associate with me with America. There's a lot of Europeans in Africa, so they don't know me to be American. So I'm not injected into these conversations automatically. Or even Peace Corps itself. A lot of times we'll get out of jail free card if like we're not, we Peace Corps. We're not American. We Peace Corps sometimes, because that kind of like Peace Corps is known for positive things. Sometimes America is a more negative connotation. If you're American, you're rich, you have money, you should give me money because you're American. But if I'm Peace Corps, they know I'm a poor volunteer living in the bush teaching. So it's a different connotation.
Got it.
So anyways, I'll tell you the two stories of Trump's shithole comment effect. First one was I was sitting at a taxi station waiting for a car. And this was when Trump and, was it Kim Jong-un, the current... Un, right? Is the current North Korean leader. And there was a heated discussion about if they had the choice of which country to go to, if they would go to America or North Korea. And it just bewildered me just because of like some of the attitude that Trump had put off. These people are having this honest debate. And I don't think honestly know much about North Korea. Because I don't think they want to go to North Korea. I don't think anybody would want to do that. As a choice between America and North Korea, the idea of what freedom is versus authoritarian, communism. But that was the conversation being had very, adamantly, like being very vocalized, like that it was an actual honest debate, like which country I'd rather go to.
Wow.
So I thought that was curious that was the effect, being like I'd rather go to North Korea than America because of our current president's kind of incendiary language.
Okay.
So
was that the consensus? Like
no, it was definitely being debated, but the fact that was the debate,
but just the fact
that was
that's
even a
the debate.
question.
I'm sitting there and I'm scratching my head like, oh, these motherfuckers want to go to North Korea. What? Like,
yeah.
Oh man, that like
it's hard for us to imagine what's going through their mind about the U.S. that would make that even a question.
Right. I think a lot of times over there, because there's not a lot of exposure, especially like North Korea. I mean, I think they believe North Korea. Maybe it's just like another European country, or maybe it's like South Korea. I don't think they fully understand the dynamic.
Right.
That's going on there. Or China, because China is very common there. Everybody knows Chinese people are everywhere in Liberia. They're building the roads, they're building the buildings over there. And so maybe North Korea and China are kind of lumped into the same category. Because a lot of people, China is giving scholarships and sending all kinds of people from Liberia to go to school in China.
Okay.
A lot of people, that's going all over Africa, they're doing that. It made me really sad to think that, it's good that Chinese are doing that, but America we should be doing that too.
Why aren't we?
Yeah, or we should, and we do to some degree, but I don't think,
Well, right now we have a friend over there who is highly qualified, has gotten into grad school, and yet wasn't able to start this semester because their visa was denied.
Right.
So we're not doing a real good job of that right now.
Right, fully qualified. He actually was granted the Nelson Mandela fellowship, wasn't it? He get that? He got the fellowship, or he got.
I think that was
That was the other guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not the same person.
And we had two friends.
Anyway.
We had two friends that were trying to get into school in America, and one was accepted into grad school over here, but his visa was denied. I don't really agree with that. If we should be bringing qualified humans to America,
Absolutely.
to train them. Anyways, China's doing that, and that's how they win the hearts and minds of people, right? As you come in, like, I'll build your roads, I'll build. They'll spy on you, but at least we're going to build your hospital for you.
And they'll take any diamonds they find in the process.
We'll take diamonds and all the trees you got. So that's kind of its own separate mess. Anyway, so the shithole comment. So then the other side of it, it was in my village. I did a lot of work with a local farming cooperative, and we were working one day, and I don't want to call him the local drunk, but he is drunk a lot and he's local. And he was the principal of the local elementary school, so that's always good.
Oh, wow.
Fairly common. You just kind of learn to live with it. It's
Right,
not.
that's
It's not.
the thing.
It's
Local
not an
Trump
outrage.
makes it sound like they're the one
No,
town who's known for that. Like there's plenty of them. He doesn't
Right,
stand out.
Yeah. He's like he's one of. How about that?
One of.
Not the one of. But he's very bombastic and loud, and likes to make sure his opinion is heard. Loves to get into politics. Anyways, we're sitting there. We're sitting there taking a break. Me and this other guy, one of my good friends, who I'm still in touch with, Mr. Nava. Sitting there taking a break. We've been working all morning, freaking tired. It's hot, taking a break. And here comes Guy. He'd been drinking already all morning. He spent his morning drinking, not working, and comes up and wants to start talking politics while we're sitting there, because it's very common, especially with men, to talk politics. And I don't remember what came up. He'd been listening, or he has a little FM, he has a little radio he was carrying around with him and listening to whatever's going on. You did get BBC over there, or not Africa. International BBC has its own programming for Africa.
Okay.
And the whole shithole comment thing was on there, and so this guy was talking about the shithole comment, and of course he's drunk, and he starts wagging his finger and basically saying something along the lines like, "You look at our country, you see look at what is here. There's nothing here." He obviously just fired up about the lack of development, and like they like to point their finger at political engines of being at fault for no development, and so he was getting upset like, "Look at us, we have trash everywhere. We poo in the street." He's like, "We are a shithole country." I was like, "Huh." I was like, "Okay." And because I'm just observing and I'm asking questions. I was like, "Well, man, you still think it all right for the president of the United States to say that about another country?" He goes, what did he say? It was more or less the sentiment is like, if the man correct, the man correct. Like but he's correct. This place we are. Look at this place. This place is a shithole. And so that's the two dynamics that I saw coming out of
wow,
like something that we're doing over here. Our political leaders are doing. Obviously, I think most of the majority of people took it the other way. Like it was a very inflammatory. It did not represent America well. It made if you're American overseas, it definitely makes your life a little more interesting for a while. Those kind of comments,
right?
Because it's easy to say that when you're sitting in the White House judging other countries, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very lazy and short-sighted comment too. Because maybe in a lot of ways the guy might maybe that comment's correct. In a lot of ways, maybe some of the sentiment, even though the comment itself is very vulgar, behind the comment, some things, maybe there's some truth to some of the sentiments behind the comment. But there's such a better way to articulate and have conversations rather than just giving a blunt, your country's a shithole and we're not gonna develop there. I want nothing to do with it.
Right.
Like that's just not the way to go about it as a leader in the world. Like it's just not.
The statement in and of itself is not productive in any way. So why?
Right. It's completely
like there is no point in saying that.
Like instead of having a conversation behind the sentiment, which caused that kind of comment, like why not? But that's the downside of having people that straight shooter, right? Like that's you don't get those nuanced conversations. You're getting a very blunt. Statement, not a conversation. And
right. So there are a lot of Liberians with far less education than the person who said that, who will give you a much more nuanced or at least like specific critique that they are very much self-deprecating. It was
it's so sad too.
It was very difficult to frequently be told, like, the problem with Liberia is Liberians, like, we cause our own problems, and they would put us up on a pedestal. And so that was always very awkward to be like, no, we're not perfect either. America isn't, totally ideal. Like, we have all kinds of problems too. There may be different kinds of problems, but because they are surrounded by their problems and haven't lived our experience to know what kinds of challenges we face personally, they just don't have a conceptualization of what that is. And so they would make all kinds of very derogatory comments about their own country and people. That was not uncommon, but they were it wasn't just a random comment. It was always pointing out a particular cause of a problem that they wish they could change. Okay. And typically they were the person who was doing their personal best to change it. They just couldn't control anyone else around them. Right. So, for example, Liberian time runs late. Sure. Everything that happens there happens a few hours after when it was scheduled.
When you have no need for time.
And so they would always make comments about, you run on American time, like, we need to be better about that here. If people would just come on time, we could do more, etc. Right? Mm-hmm. And so they themselves are often the ones who are showing up at the same time as we are. They're trying to make it better. Right. But they feel like they're treading water because everyone around them is still living by the cultural norm of, it doesn't matter if you're running a few hours late. And so they would often make those comments. It's not like they're not self-aware of things that make things more difficult for them or that make it challenging to develop further in the way that they see the developing world. Mm-hmm. But they are willing to look at particular issues and, think about what the solution is versus just saying it's crappy. They have more nuance to it is the ridiculous thing to me, that someone who is supposed to be a world leader, doesn't bother with that level of depth. Right.
And is frequently making comments that are at that same surface level.
And that's just pointless. That doesn't accomplish anything.
Right. I want to talk about how your journey over the last couple of years has affected you guys personally, and I think now's a good time for a break. So I'm gonna do that.